If I'd known that knock on his door would change everything, I might have turned around. At the time, it felt like just another Tuesday and a long morning of lectures, a rushed coffee, and a text from my best friend that read, Maya. Hey, need a small favor. Now, I've known Maya long enough to know that her small favors are never small. Last semester, it was helping her fake a sprained ankle to skip a presentation. Before that, it was babysitting her cousin's cat, who turned out to be pregnant. So naturally, I hesitated. What kind of favor? I texted back, fully expecting chaos. Her reply came instantly. Maya, just tutoring. Easy. You're good at that. She wasn't wrong. I was good at tutoring. It helped pay my rent and kept me from feeling like an unproductive blob between classes. I just didn't realize she meant her brother. When she said, Ethan needs help, my fingers froze over the keyboard. Ethan, as in Ethan Ward, Maya's older brother. The one who barely came downstairs during our movie nights. The one who everyone in our circle quietly referred to as the mysterious one. Tall, brooding. Always seemed like he was in a different world. And honestly, kind of intimidating. I remembered seeing him once, months ago, when Maya dragged me into her kitchen mid-gossip. He'd been leaning against the counter, hair messy, wearing a hoodie, eyes fixed on a physics textbook like it had personally offended him. He barely acknowledged us, just gave a curt nod. That nod alone had made my heart stutter for no good reason. Maya, I called her later that day. You have literally hundreds of friends. Why me? Because, she said, her tone all sweet manipulation, you're the only one smart enough to handle him. That's not a compliment, that's a trap. Please, Emma. He's failing economics. If he flunks again, Mom will end him. You're his only hope. I sighed, pressing the phone to my forehead. You know I hate tutoring people I know. It's awkward. You don't know him, she said quickly. You've just seen him frown a lot. That doesn't count, she wasn't wrong. But still, Ethan wasn't the type to need or want help. The idea of me sitting across from him explaining demand curves was laughable. Just one session, she added. If it's terrible, I'll find someone else. One session. I could survive that. The next day, I found myself standing in front of the ward's front porch, clutching my notebook like it was a shield. Maya had promised she'd be home. I'll make the introductions, don't worry. But when I rang the bell, her mom answered, smiling warmly and saying, Oh, Maya's out. But Ethan's upstairs. Go on up, dear. I considered bolting, but politeness and perhaps mild guilt won. So I climbed the stairs, each creak sounding like a warning sign. His door was half open, light spilling across the carpet. I knocked once. Come in, a low voice said. I pushed the door open, and there he was, Ethan Ward. Head bent over his laptop, glasses perched low on his nose, sunlight cutting across his jawline. He looked older than I remembered, calm, composed, and a little too serious. He glanced up slowly, meeting my eyes, and for a second I forgot why I was even there. Then he spoke. You're Maya's friend, Emma, I managed. Your new tutor. He closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, assessing me in that unhurried, thoughtful way that made my pulse quicken for no rational reason. So you're my new tutor, he repeated, a faint, amused smile tugging at his mouth. You don't look like the type to take pity on failing students. I don't, I shot back before my brain could filter the words. I charge them. He chuckled softly, and something in his expression softened, the kind of change you don't notice until you're already smiling back. Fair enough, he said. Sit wherever. I'll try not to waste your time. His room was surprisingly tidy, books stacked in uneven towers, a faint smell of coffee and mint, a window cracked open to let in the evening air. I pulled out my notes and took a deep breath, trying to sound professional. All right, I said, forcing a bright smile. Let's start with what you don't understand. He looked at me for a beat, then grinned. How much time do you have? That was the first time I laughed, really laughed, around him. I didn't know then that it would be the first of many. Right there, sitting across from Ethan Ward for the first time, I thought this was just another job, another name on my list of students. But if I'd known how much that single hour would ripple through everything I thought I understood about comfort, connection, and control, I might have turned around before I ever knocked. I always thought tutoring was about formulas, patience, and maybe the occasional headache. What I didn't expect was a lesson in holding my composure while someone like Ethan Ward looked at me as though I were the most entertaining thing he'd seen all week. It started fine. Structured, professional, very I'm only here to help. I spread my notes across his desk, explaining the concept of equilibrium. He leaned back in his chair, spinning a pen between his fingers, eyes half-lidded but sharp. So, supply meets demand here, I said, pointing at the graph. Right. And when that shifts, everything collapses, he finished. Not collapses, I corrected. It adjusts, he smirked. Semantics. The corner of his mouth quirked in that infuriating way that made it hard to tell whether he was mocking me or genuinely listening. I folded my arms. Are you always this difficult? Only when people assume I'm not paying attention, he said lightly. Go on, Professor. I wanted to roll my eyes. Instead, I pressed on, explaining elasticities and marginal cost curves while he lounged like he had all the time in the world. Occasionally, he'd interrupt with a question so specific it proved he'd understood everything, just to see me flounder. Okay, fine, I said after the third interruption, laughing. You're not hopeless. You're just, what's the word? Infuriatingly capable. Thank you, he said smoothly. I do try. By the 40-minute mark, my patience wore thin. He was clearly smart enough to get through the material, but his energy wasn't in the lesson. It was in teasing me, pushing buttons just enough to see how I'd react. When I closed my notebook, he raised a brow. Giving up already? I have other students who actually want to learn, I said, standing up. You can stare at your pen without my help. I grabbed my bag and walked to the door, then stopped. The handle didn't move. I jiggled it again, locked. I turned slowly, trying not to sound alarmed. Ethan, the door's locked. He didn't even look guilty. Just met my eyes, calm as ever. Yeah, I locked it. I blinked. You what? I don't want Maya or Mom interrupting again. Last time I tried to study in peace, Maya came in looking for snacks. Oh, for a split second, my mind had gone somewhere dramatic. Something cinematic and ridiculous. But his tone was casual, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Okay, I said, exhaling slowly. Next time, maybe a little warning before you trap your tutor in your room? He smiled faintly. Would have ruined the suspense. Suspense? I echoed, half annoyed, half amused. The air felt different after that. The initial awkwardness gave way to something quieter, something unspoken. The kind of calm that comes after you realize no one's watching. Without the hum of footsteps in the hallway or the clatter of Maya's playlist downstairs, the silence between us stretched. Not uncomfortable, just new. He leaned forward, finally opening his book. So it's equilibrium again? You want to keep going now? I asked, skeptical. I figured I should at least earn my tutor's forgiveness before she quits. The way he said it, softly, sincerely, made me sit back down before I even realized I'd done it. We started again. This time he actually listened, asked questions, jotted things down. When I corrected him, he didn't argue. He smiled and said, "Fair point." Somewhere between the laughter and the quiet, the lesson turned into something else entirely. So why economics? He asked at one point. What do you mean? You could have picked anything. You seem like someone who'd rather write novels than analyze market behavior. I laughed. You're not wrong, but my parents think creative writing sounds like code for unemployed. So here I am, he chuckled. I get that. My dad still thinks engineering is the only real career, but I hate it. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. The teasing edge was gone. What replaced it was raw, tired truth. Then why do it? I asked gently. He shrugged, eyes drifting toward the window. Because people expect me to. Because it's easier to disappoint myself than disappoint them. The room felt heavier after that, not sad, just real. I didn't know what to say, so I said the first thing that felt right. Maybe you don't have to pick one version of yourself forever. You can hate something now and love something else later. It's not failure. It's being human. He looked at me for a long moment, and I realized he wasn't just hearing my words. He was studying them, like they mattered. Has anyone ever told you you're annoyingly good at pep talks? He said finally, voice low. Only every person I've ever tutored, I replied with a smile. He reached for the lock and turned it slowly. The click echoed louder than it should have. You're free now, he said, almost teasing. But when I stood, I didn't move toward the door right away. Guess I'll see you next week? I asked, trying to sound casual. He met my gaze, that small, disarming smile returning. Yeah, same time. As I stepped into the hallway, I realized my heart was doing that annoying flutter thing, the kind that doesn't ask permission. And somewhere between the locked door and his laugh, I forgot I was supposed to be teaching. It's strange how quickly something can shift from uncomfortable to familiar, and from this is just a job to I don't mind staying a little longer. What began as a single awkward tutoring session became a twice-a-week routine. Mondays and Thursdays, 5 p.m. sharp at least. That was the plan, but somehow the clock always ticked past 7 before either of us noticed. Ethan was different now, not less teasing but softer about it. He'd still throw in his sarcastic comments, but they came with the faintest smile, like he wanted me to know he was joking. And somewhere along the way, he started bringing me coffee, always black with 1 sugar, exactly how I liked it. I hadn't told him that. Not directly. "Don't look so surprised," he said one evening, handing me the cup as I settled at his desk. "You said once that too much milk makes it taste like regret." I laughed. "You remember that?" He shrugged, pretending to study the textbook. "You talk a lot when you're explaining things. Some of it sticks." He had a point. I did talk a lot when I taught, filling silence with explanations and little stories. But lately it wasn't about filling silence. It was about watching him listen, the way his brow furrowed slightly, the way he'd lean in when I used examples from everyday life. It was too easy to forget that I wasn't supposed to enjoy this. Sometimes we drifted from economics into everything else. Music. The weird things professors said in lectures, our favorite late-night snacks. He made fun of my handwriting. "Are you writing notes or casting spells?" And once, when I forgot my pen, he lent me one that had a small crack in it. A week later, he replaced it with a new one. "So you can stop stealing mine," he said, but his smile gave him away. One Thursday, as I was packing up, Maya poked her head into the room. "You two still alive in here?" she asked, grinning. Ethan groaned. "Go away, Maya." She ignored him, turning to me. "He doesn't act like this with anyone else, you know. Usually he just grunts." "Maya," he warned, but she was already laughing her way out the door. When she left, I glanced at him, trying to keep my voice neutral. "She's exaggerating, right?" He didn't look up from his notes. Maybe not. I told myself not to overthink that. The following week, rain began just as I reached their house. The kind of steady downpour that blurred everything into silver streaks. By the time I climbed the stairs, my hair was damp and I felt like a half-soaked cat. "Wow," Ethan said when he opened the door, amused. "Should I get you a towel or a life jacket?" "Both would be nice," I muttered, wringing out the edge of my sleeve. He actually brought me a towel, warm, fresh from the dryer, and while I laughed, my heart did a little flip. We started the lesson, thunder murmuring outside like a soundtrack. Halfway through explaining price elasticity, the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out. The room plunged into darkness. "Oh, perfect," I said, laughing. "So much for modern civilization." "Hold on," Ethan said, his voice somewhere to my left. I heard drawers opening, then a faint click. A small flame glowed, followed by the soft light of a candle. He set it on the desk between us. The flicker danced over his face, catching the edge of his smile. There, problem solved. The candlelight made everything feel smaller, closer. The space between us didn't feel like a desk anymore. It felt like a breath. I tried to focus on the notes, but my brain had apparently decided to write poetry instead of equations. "Why do you even bother studying this?" I asked, maybe to distract myself. "You clearly hate it." He leaned back in his chair, eyes on the flame. "It's not that I can't do it, I just stopped believing I could." Something about the way he said it, quiet, not bitter, made my chest ache. "Who made you think you couldn't?" I asked softly. He gave a humorless smile. "A few teachers, my dad. Myself, probably." For a moment, the thunder outside filled the silence. I wanted to reach across the table, but instead I said, "Well, that's ridiculous. You're the smartest, lazy person I've ever met." He laughed, a low, genuine sound. "Thanks, I think." "I'm serious," I said, meeting his eyes. "You're good at this. You just overthink. You look at problems like they're already against you. But they're not. You just need to stop assuming you'll fail before you even start." He was quiet for a long moment, then said almost under his breath, "You know, you're the only person who's never given up on me." That shouldn't have hit me the way it did. It shouldn't have made the air thicken or my throat tighten, but it did. I smiled, trying to keep my voice steady. Then you're stuck with me until you pass. The candle crackled. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, the quiet between us felt warmer than any blanket. We didn't get much more studying done that night. Mostly, we just talked about the kind of people we wanted to be, the kind of lives we wanted to build, the things we feared admitting out loud, and every time he looked up from his notes, my heart forgot what a lesson was. By the end of the month, tutoring Ethan had become my favorite part of the week, though I'd never admit that out loud. We'd fallen into a rhythm. I'd show up with notes and mild sarcasm. He'd counter with coffee and the kind of banter that made studying feel almost easy. But good things have a way of getting noticed, especially when they're not supposed to. It started small. A few whispers in the hallway, a teasing comment from a classmate. "Emma, you're tutoring Maya's brother, right? You two seem close." I laughed it off the first time. And the second. But by the third, I could feel the heat rising in my face. Then Maya said it. We were sitting under a tree outside campus, eating sandwiches between lectures. She nudged me with her elbow. "So, you and Ethan, you've been spending a lot of time together." I forced a casual shrug. "He's improving." "That's all," she smirked. "Sure, but he doesn't make coffee for me when I study, or stay up late with me talking about life." My stomach tightened. "Maya," she lifted her hands. "Relax, I'm joking." Her smile faltered a little. "I just don't want you getting caught up in something complicated. He's been through a lot, Em." The tone in her voice, half protective sister, half quiet warning, stayed with me long after we parted ways. That evening, when I knocked on Ethan's door, I was more aware than ever of how it must look. Me slipping into his room. The door closing behind us, laughter spilling through the cracks. He noticed right away. "You okay?" he asked, watching me set down my bag more quietly than usual. "Fine," I said too quickly. He didn't push, but I saw the question lingering in his eyes all through the lesson. And later, when I left, I could feel him watching me go. Not with the usual teasing smile, but something heavier, almost uncertain. The next week, he canceled. "Family dinner," he texted. Then 2 days later, feeling tired, then nothing. No new schedule. No explanation. Just silence. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was genuinely busy. But after the third cancellation, I stopped believing my own excuses. I hadn't realized how much of my routine revolved around those evenings until they were gone. My week felt hollow, like the hours I used to spend at his desk were now just empty. When I caught myself checking my phone every few minutes, I knew I had a problem. A week later, I found myself standing on his doorstep again. I hadn't told Maya I was coming. I wasn't even sure what I'd say. I just knew I couldn't stand not knowing. His mom answered the door, surprised but kind as always. "Oh, Emma, it's been a while. Ethan's upstairs." I climbed the stairs, heart pounding like I was about to take an exam I hadn't studied for. When I reached his room, the door was half open. He was sitting at his desk, headphones around his neck, the same candle from that rainy night sitting unlit beside him. He looked up, startled. "Emma?" "Hey," I said softly. "You've been hard to reach." He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting away. "Yeah, sorry, I've been busy." "Right." I forced a smile. "Too busy for economics?" He didn't laugh, just sighed and said, "Too busy for rumors." That stopped me cold. "What?" He leaned back, gaze still fixed on the desk. "Maya told me people have been talking about us. I thought it'd be better to give you some space before it got worse." I crossed my arms, more to steady myself than anything. "So your solution was to vanish?" "I didn't want to make your life harder," he said quietly. "You've got enough to deal with without people assuming things." There it was, the line that should have made sense but instead made something twist painfully in my chest. "You already made it harder," I said before I could stop myself. He looked up then, eyes locking on mine. "What do you mean?" I swallowed. To stay away. The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't awkward. It was charged, like the air before a storm. I could feel everything I hadn't said crowding at the back of my throat. He stood slowly, crossing the space between us, but stopping just short of too close. His voice was low, careful. "Emma," I shook my head. "I know, we shouldn't. You're Maya's brother, I'm..." He smiled faintly, sad and knowing. Yeah, I know. Neither of us moved. Neither of us had to. The truth was already there, sitting between us in the quiet, bigger than either of us could ignore, softer than either of us could define. I think he wanted to say something else, but instead he just exhaled, a long, quiet sound that felt almost like surrender. Thank you, he said finally, for coming anyway. I nodded, my throat tight. Always. When I left, he didn't stop me. He didn't have to. The door closed softly behind me, and the silence that followed said everything words couldn't. Sometimes love doesn't need a kiss to be real. Just the silence that follows almost saying it. Exam results day arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made my stomach twist. The air on campus was electric, students rushing between bulletin boards, laughter, shouts, groans, and paper rustling like rain. I wasn't even looking for Ethan at first. I told myself I was just there to see my own results. But when I finally found his name on the list, my heart skipped. Ethan Walker, 88%. I blinked twice. Then again, the number stayed the same. He didn't just pass, he aced it. I didn't realize I was smiling until Maya came up beside me. You saw it, huh? I turned to her, unable to hide my grin. He did it, she beamed. I knew you'd get him there. You're some kind of miracle worker. I shook my head, still staring at the list. He did it himself. But deep down, I couldn't stop the warmth blooming in my chest. The quiet pride, the memory of every late-night study session, every argument that turned into laughter, every time he'd said, I'll try again. Just don't give up on me. That evening, Maya decided to throw a small celebration at their house. Just family, a couple of friends, and way too much pizza. When I arrived, Ethan was standing near the window talking with his mom. He looked different. Lighter somehow, like the weight he'd been carrying for months had finally lifted. When he saw me, his smile reached his eyes in a way I hadn't seen before. Hey, teacher. Hey, student, I teased back. Congratulations, Mr. 88%. He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. You saw, huh? Whole campus did, I said. You're officially the comeback story of the semester. He grinned. But there was something softer beneath it. Something that made my heart flutter in that dangerous, familiar way. The night unfolded in warmth and noise, music, clinking glasses, Maya teasing Ethan about his sudden genius. But as the guests drifted out one by one, the house grew quiet. The laughter faded into soft hums from the kitchen. I stayed behind to help clean up, partly out of politeness, mostly because I wasn't ready to leave yet. I was rinsing dishes when I heard footsteps behind me. Still working? Ethan's voice was low, amused. I didn't turn. Someone's got to make sure your celebration doesn't end in chaos. He chuckled, moving closer. You don't have to, you know. I know. I set a plate down, forcing a casual tone. But if I leave, you'll probably just use paper plates next time. He leaned against the counter beside me. You say that like it's a bad idea. I rolled my eyes. But before I could respond, he said softly, Thank you. Something in his tone made me stop. I turned, and he was watching me with that quiet intensity I'd seen before, the kind that made it hard to breathe. For what? I asked. For not giving up on me, he said. For believing I could be more than the guy everyone thought was wasting his life. I tried to shrug it off, to make light of it. That's what tutors are supposed to do. He shook his head. No, Emma, that's what you do. You looked at me like I could still change things. No one's done that in a long time. My throat tightened. I turned back to the sink, gripping the edge for balance. You did the work, Ethan. You're the one who showed up. He was silent for a moment. Then quietly, You still think I only locked that door for privacy? The words hit me like a spark. I froze. Slowly, I turned to face him. He'd stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint rise and fall of his chest, the hesitation in his eyes. I swallowed hard. Ethan. He took a small step forward. That day when you looked up at me and said, If you're going to waste my time, at least do it honestly. That's when it started. I'd never met someone who talked to me like that. It's like I was worth challenging. My heart was pounding now. You can't just say things like that. Why not? His voice was gentle, but there was an ache in it. You already knew, didn't you? I wanted to deny it, to pull away, to protect what we had. But my silence betrayed me. He smiled faintly, eyes searching mine. I tried to stay away. After the rumors. After Maya said people were talking. But every time I told myself to stop thinking about you, I'd hear your voice in my head explaining something, laughing at me, believing in me. I felt something warm and terrifying rise inside me, something that had been waiting for this moment all along. I felt it too, I whispered, since that first night when you actually listened. But I didn't want to ruin what we had, or hurt Maya. He nodded, the space between us electric but tender. I don't want to ruin anything either, I just can't keep pretending this doesn't matter. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he reached out slowly, his fingers brushing mine. Hesitant, asking permission without words, and I didn't pull away. The contact was soft, almost imperceptible, but it carried the weight of everything we hadn't said. The tension, the longing, the unspoken truths. He stepped closer, until his forehead rested lightly against mine. I don't know what happens next, he murmured. Neither do I whispered back. But I know I don't want to keep pretending either. The world around us seemed to fade. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the faint sounds of the street outside. All that remained was warmth, honesty, and the steady beat of something real. We didn't rush it. There was no dramatic kiss, no movie-perfect moment, just an embrace that felt like exhale after holding our breath for too long. His arms around me were gentle, steady, and certain. And for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. All this time, I said softly, my voice barely audible against his shoulder, I thought I was teaching you. He smiled against my hair. Turns out I was teaching you how to feel again? I laughed quietly. Maybe. He pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes warm, unguarded, and full of something I didn't need words to name. Then, he said softly, lesson learned. And this time, when he leaned in, I didn't stop him. It wasn't reckless or forbidden anymore. It was right, like the final chapter of a story we'd been writing together without realizing it. The kind where both of us finally understood what the other meant all along. It's strange how quiet love can be. Months later, I found myself sitting at the same wooden desk where it all started. The one by the window in Ethan's room. The one that used to make me so nervous my hands would shake. Except now, there was a coffee mug beside my notebook with a messy little note scribbled in his handwriting. For the best tutor and the worst student. He was on the bed behind me, pretending to read, though I could feel his eyes on me every few seconds. The same way he used to back when he was trying to figure me out. Stop staring, I said without looking up. He laughed quietly. I'm not staring, I'm observing. Observing what? How my tutor still bites her lip when she's concentrating. I turned, glaring at him, but he just grinned and went back to his book. Some days, I still couldn't believe how much had changed. It had been 3 months since the night of his results, 3 months since the quiet confession in the kitchen that turned my world inside out. At first, I didn't know how to tell Maya. The thought of that conversation alone made me feel like I was carrying a secret too delicate to name. But Ethan, in typical Ethan fashion, just said, "She's your best friend. She'll know before you say a word," and as usual, he was right. The next day at campus, Maya walked straight up to me, hands on hips, eyebrows raised. "So," she began, "should I say congrats or should I scream into a pillow first?" My heart nearly stopped. "What are you talking about?" She smirked. "Emma, you glow." And my brother actually smiles now. If that's not suspicious, I don't know what is. I braced for anger, disappointment, but instead she hugged me. "I knew he needed someone like you," she said softly. "Someone who'd push him, not pity him. You're good for him." I blinked in disbelief. "You're okay with this?" She rolled her eyes. "Please. As long as you keep tutoring him, maybe he won't fail his next class." We both laughed until my eyes stung. That's when I realized something. Sometimes the people who matter most don't need explanations. They just see. Life settled into a rhythm after that. Ethan started volunteering at a local learning center, helping younger students who struggled like he once did. I teased him that he'd stolen my job, but secretly I'd never been prouder. Our study sessions became something else entirely. Sometimes we actually studied. Other times we'd just talk about everything and nothing, books, future plans, the absurdity of life. He learned how I liked my coffee. I learned he talked in his sleep. He'd steal my pens, I'd steal his hoodies. There was no big drama, no storms. Just a quiet, steady warmth that felt like sunlight through a half-open curtain. Gentle, consistent, and real. One rainy afternoon, I sat by that same window watching droplets chase each other down the glass. Ethan came up behind me, wrapping his arms loosely around my shoulders. "You're thinking too hard," he murmured. I smiled. "Maybe I'm just remembering." "Remembering what?" "That day you locked the door." He laughed low and fond. "You're never letting me live that down, are you?" I turned slightly to face him. "Never. You terrified me." He kissed the top of my head. "And yet you came back." "I almost didn't," I admitted. I was so sure it was going to be awkward. Or wrong, or just a mistake. Was it? I looked up at him, the rain light painting soft lines across his face. No, it was the best thing I never planned. We stood there for a while, listening to the rain. In the distance, I heard Maya calling out something about dinner, and Ethan groaned. "She's still convinced we live off coffee and air." "She's not wrong," I said, laughing. That evening, we sat together at his desk again. Books open, pencils scattered, half a page of notes between us. He pointed at the mess of equations. "You know, I still don't get why you like teaching this stuff." "It's not about the formulas," I said. "It's about watching someone realize they can do it. That moment when they stop doubting themselves." He smiled, tapping his pen against the table. "Guess I was your favorite student then." I teased. "You were definitely the most stubborn. Stubborn or determined. Same thing in your case." He leaned over the desk, closing the space between us, and whispered, "And what about now? Am I still your student?" I grinned. "Always. You still need help with time management, remember?" He laughed, leaning back in his chair. "You're never going to stop being my tutor, are you?" "Probably not," I said softly. "But you make it worth it." Later that night, after Maya had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Ethan and I sat side by side, watching the glow of his laptop fade as we wrapped up another study session. The silence between us was peaceful, the kind that didn't need filling. He reached over, taking my hand under the table. His thumb brushed lightly across my knuckles, a silent promise that no matter how ordinary things looked, they weren't. Because love, I realized, isn't about fireworks or grand gestures. It's about the small unspoken things, the shared glances, the quiet encouragement, the feeling of being truly seen. It's the coffee mug with your name misspelled on purpose. The way he pretends to be bad at something, just so you'll sit closer. The courage to knock on a door that once scared you. Sometimes, I still think back to that first day, to how nervous I was, standing outside his room with a stack of notes and a head full of doubts. If I'd known that knock on his door would change everything, I'd thought then I might have turned around. Now, I know I never would have, because that locked door wasn't about being trapped. It was where I finally found someone who saw me, not as a tutor, not as a friend's favor, but as someone worth holding on to. Ethan looked up from his notes, catching me staring. "What?" he asked, smiling. "Nothing," I said, smiling back. "Just thinking about how far we've come." He tilted his head. "You mean from me locking you in a room?" I laughed. "Exactly." He leaned forward, closing his book. "And how does the story end, Professor?" I reached out, tracing my fingers over the edge of his notebook. "I was asked to tutor my friend's older brother," I said softly, meeting his gaze. "But when he locked that door, he accidentally unlocked something in both of us." He smiled. Slow, warm, and real. Best lesson ever. And as the rain eased outside and the world felt soft again, I realized it truly was.